Just because one person says no, don't let that be the end of you trying to get somewhere. Don't let that one no stop you from whatever it is you want to do.
You're listening to Artistry with Heart, a musician's wellness podcast. I'm Stephanie Lynn Bernards. Today, we're chatting with Megan Diana, a brilliant singer, songwriter, vocalist, and multi-instrumentalist pioneering a new music genre, dream country disco, and whose original music delights and inspires audiences all over the world. Megan Diana is also the founder of Piano Push Play, a Portland-based organization that works with local piano companies to rescue old pianos and transform them into works of art for the world to enjoy. Her debut album, Women in My Head, was released in 2018, but it was her sophomore album, Cabin Fever, that gave birth to Dream Country Disco. Megan Diana is currently on tour all over the U.S. You can learn more about her tour dates in the show notes below. Megan, I'm so honored to have you with me today.
I'm
Welcome.
so happy to be here too. Thank you.
It's so fun to be with you.
Yes, I love it. It's been a long time. It's amazing.
Like since
a decade at least.
Yeah. So what? It's been like 12 years?
Yeah. But I mean, we also knew each other from PSU, which was like before I even started this, and something that was, I think, very life-changing for my perspective as a musician was taking that Lisa Marsh class. Like, absolutely. Like,
Yes.
She changed how I thought about myself and who I was as a pianist, certainly. And later on as a musician, like the more I learned through that class, it was like, wow, just really mind expanding and heart expanding.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
She is such a healing soul and
Yeah.
super transformational person to be around. So
Yeah.
But you are such a multi-talented musician with an impeccable way of drawing your audience into your performances. And I'm always inspired by your innovative approach to creating and sharing music. You're truly a genre pioneer and an inspiring entrepreneur. And I'm just really excited for this conversation with you.
Thank you.
So, Megan, being the multi-instrumentalist that you are, I'm so curious about how your musical journey began. So tell me a little about your earlier years. How were you first introduced to music?
Yeah. So my mom was a musical theater director when I was little. I mean, she was up until, even recently she was still doing like some like community theater and stuff where she still lives. But when I was a little child, my dad was in the Army, and this might be surprising to some, but every Army base there's usually like a single soldiers theater. There's like, an activity center for families. There's all this stuff. And there's like a real emphasis on making sure that arts are still accessible wherever you are in the world. And, because it kind of keeps up, morale. It keeps people doing things. So when we were on different Army bases, my mom was always like the theater director and also handling the USO shows and stuff. And so when I was really little, we were in Arizona and she was doing a production of Annie. And I think I was 3 or 4 or something, and I would always go to rehearsal with her, and I knew all the songs, and I remember being like, I want to be in this show. And she's like, you're too young. But she was like, I'm going to give you piano lessons because you'll be a better singer, musician. You'll just be in charge more of whatever you want to do in performance or theater or music or whatever. And she also always had regrets because she knew she could play piano, but she was like, I can't play it the way I wish I could to like accompany myself or others or something. And so piano lessons were the first thing that I started at like 5. And we had my grandmother's piano at home, and the story goes like you couldn't get me off this piano once, they started giving me lessons and all that stuff. And I always was doing performance and singing in choirs, and my mom would do the choir at church, and definitely still hear when I do harmonies and stuff on my own recordings, I'm like, I hear the things I grew up singing in my structures. But in 8th grade, we had just moved to Oregon. My dad had retired from the Army and we moved here. And it was like the first month of school or something. And my band director at the time was like, does anybody want to try French horn? Because nobody's playing it. And I was like literally 13th chair clarinet or something. And I was like, I want to try. And I picked up that instrument, and now looking back on it, like, why was I able to kind of be pretty good at it pretty quick, and then really got good at it? And I started college as a horn performance major, actually. My ear, I know if I'm playing the right note or not. Unlike the piano, if you play a C, it's a C. If you hold valve number 1 down on a horn, you can get C, E, G, the A, B, C. You can get a lot of different notes. And so you need to be able to know how to get the note you want, and if you're playing the right one. And that's hard for some people coming into playing an instrument. So that's how I kind of started doing piano, and I was always singing and then doing like horn. And being a music major, they were like, well, you have 3 paths. You could be a music teacher, you could be an orchestra player, you could be a jazz player. There wasn't, hey, you could actually maybe you could write music. I spent a couple years doing horn performance, but I have to say, I always knew I just didn't want to be a teacher. And I actually had never tried playing horn in any other style other than like classical, really. So I was like, well, I'm not going to do jazz. And then at the time I was like, wow, I love this instrument. I love playing it. And not that doesn't sound like a dream career to play glorious orchestral music all the time or something. I just knew I had never been dedicated to that instrument like you need to be to do that career. I stepped away from music for 4 or 5 years. I didn't play a piano. I didn't sing. I didn't play that instrument. I went off and got just a general arts degree. And I worked in food actually for a couple of years in New York. I didn't know how to make my own career, and that wasn't that encouraged at the time. And I wasn't as self-actualized as I am now, where I'm like, well, actually, there's a million ways you can be in music. It's just, at the time, there was like such a small few lanes for you to be slotted into with a music degree.
Right.
That was limiting. And when I came back to town, I was going to PSU for like the second time around. I'd had this experience where I'd lived with my parents for a year.
As an adult.
I was 25, because I had like tried New York, and I had just broken up with somebody that I had been with for this whole time and all these, life moments. And I kind of was taking this break with my parents for a year. And while I was there, my mom was like, you know what, we love to have you, but also like, if you're going to be here, like, I need your voice in the choir once a week, And I was like, of course I can do that. And of course, then she started to be like, well, we might need a little horn offertory music at church. I was like, okay, I haven't played that in so long, but I'll bring it out and I'll try. And at the end of that year, she was doing a production as well at this community theater. And she's like, I think there might be a part for you. So I auditioned, and I was in this musical. And throughout this year, all these people were just so sweet. And we're just like, wow, your voice is so beautiful. And oh, wow, I love to hear this horn and all this stuff. I just had this moment where I realized that the thing I love to do, the thing I feel I'm meant to do, the thing I'm good at, the thing I spent, so long, like really, studying in a lot of ways or just enjoying. And I had this talent that so many people wish they could do, wish they could sing, wish they could play a piano. Like,
right.
And I kind of made the decision. I was like, okay, I'm going to go back to Portland, and I think I'm going to pursue music. I don't know what that means yet. But I went back to Portland, so I was 26 when I was in that class or something.
Okay, with Lisa?
With Lisa, and I was kind of coming back to be like, I think I want to be playing piano again. Maybe I'll start to write my own songs, which I had never thought to do. Somehow, I was always like impersonating a classical piece or something if I was writing for a camp or something, fun that I did when I was little. And I kind of say now, I'm like, I don't think I had anything to write about until I had gone through some stuff.
Yes.
Later on.
Everybody says go live some life and then come back and do your music. And right.
And now to me, I'm like, it all happened like it was supposed to. And now, and all the things that I did growing up and all the things I learned to play, like, that's why I want to utilize all those things. Because I'm like, well, this is me blending who I am and writing music from my life with all the things I love. And that's how it's supposed to be.
Everything works out the way it's supposed to. And the pieces always fit together in the way that is best suited for your path. And you can only see that often in retrospect.
Yes,
yes. So just kind of segue into more about you and like what you're doing now. you are a genre pioneer, which I love that, like, when I was reading your bio that you use that term, because I feel like there is this, I don't know, resistance to just self-creation in the musical world.
For sure.
And I love that you absolutely are a genre pioneer of dream country disco, which is so badass. And I just really want to hear more. So can you describe the dream country disco genre?
Yeah. It was like this evolution of meeting someone who played a certain instrument, right? And I knew what a pedal steel was, but the way this person played it and kind of the effects they used and just obviously their thing, their technique, their style really was like, wow, this is amazing. And eventually we found each other, like we played a couple shows together, just as a duo performance. And by that time, I love piano, but the evolution of my live sound performing is usually I'm using like a Wurlitz or a Rhodes sound, because it's hard to, to me, if you can't play a real piano, it's so hard to find a keyboard that really gets anywhere close. So I might as well. Some of these keyboards they have are really good vintage keys sound that to me just feels a little not more authentic. So I already was kind of doing, in my keyboard sound was going towards the 70s always. When I really started playing out, I would borrow an actual Whirly for the first couple years, and that is what made me just fall in love with that sound. And I started to listen to more of those songwriters from the 60s and 70s and Carole King, and like, my music is always keys driven because that's what I'm playing. I don't care about guitars. Right. I don't play one. And also I'm like, this world needs more keys, keyboards, Wurlitzers, pianos, all the things, out there on stage doing stuff. Cause it's like, that's what you typically see is lots of guitars and drums and all that stuff. So I always was doing this like vintage keys sound, and we started playing with pedal steel, and people just really loved it no matter what. And everybody would always kept saying, this is so dreamy, it is country, but country light, because it's not like he does a lot of country licks on this pedal steel when he's playing with me. He can, but like it's just very atmospheric and dreamy. But yet if it's with that instrument, there's going to be a country flavor of a little bit. And when I started writing this record, I was sampling all these 70s drum grooves, disco grooves, but kind of just slowing them down a little bit, so it wasn't quite like your average. Not that I don't want to write a real disco song, but it was just like this groovy thing, and that sound came out of starting to play with this person and this instrument, pedal steel, which is very close to like, I've learned lap steel and slide guitar, but it is the most complicated. There's 3 levers, there's like 6 pedals, there's all this stuff that they're doing with their knees and like their feet and then their hands, and
wow.
Yeah, I've learned like you're really a genius if you can play this instrument. But the evolution of the sound just started to like come from like all of the words that kept being repeated back to me when people were like, this is just so dreamy, and like, and I've never seen this pairing of instruments together. And I haven't seen, certainly today, 4 years on to like really playing regularly with pedal steel players around the world. It's like, this is an instrument that's really coming back. I can see it everywhere. And it also came from an urge of like, you know what, I actually love to dance myself. Like I want to make some more things where it's like, no, this really is kind of a song that your body needs to move to. And maybe this is why I never went by my real or my full name, Megan McGeorge. It felt like I needed to be like at the piano, like some kind of very serious thing. And so for some reason, when I decided to put out my first album and go by a version of my name, which is now what actually almost everybody calls me, they just call me Megan Diana, the whole thing, that felt a little bit more 70s. It felt a little bit more fun. Like I could see who that person was. It just it felt more like me. Right. and more matching of the sound that I was kind of developing, I guess, at that time.
Definitely. So the instruments involved are Whirly,
pedal steel, drums, bass, French horn. I have French horn almost on every song of mine. There's always lots of different percussions. Sometimes I bring in a vibraphone. Lots of layers of my voice, lots of lush layers of horn in my voice, because I'm always like kind of resourceful. I'm like, well, I can do all these things. Why don't I always, bring them in?
Right.
Because then also you don't have to pay me.
Exactly.
I love working with lots of musicians, but also a lot of the time I'm like, oh, I could do 90% of this, and then I just have to bring in my bass player, or a pedal steel. I haven't learned how to play pedal steel yet, but.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So the genre creation came as a byproduct of just being like, I'm just doing what I love to do, and this is what sounds good to me.
Yes.
And
yes.
nothing like this really exists, so I may as well just create it. Is that true?
Yes. I mean, and it's like eventually, I don't remember when, but I said that trio of words, and I was like, this is something. And I had kind of already, I think I had already written Cabin Fever, the song. Cabin Fever is that whole album, but there's one other song that's on Cabin Fever that I'm like, this is absolutely like the pinnacle of what I think dream country disco is, it's a song called Golden Age, and it's really like, it really does go into a couple different disco beats and all this stuff, and it's just really fun and dancey. I want to keep writing songs to what I imagine that those trio of words mean. So, yeah.
Yeah. When did you start composing?
It probably was 2010 or 11, I think, which is, again, when I was in those classes, and I had just started to play piano again. And I was starting to say yes to things I never said yes to in my early 20s. Like, I remember I had just come back to Portland, and I ran into Peter by happenstance, and he's like, I have this band, Magic Mouth, and we're doing this cover night, and Jose always said you had the most incredible voice. Would you sing with us? And I had just kind of had this actualization of like, what, I do want to be singing. I do want to be playing music. I don't know what else that means, but I want to be saying, I want to do it. And so I said yes. And that night of like doing these covers led to somebody else asking me to sing. And then eventually another old friend was like, hey, this teacher I teach with is looking for a singer for his band, and it seems like you're doing that now. Should I connect you to? And I had never tried writing lyrics or words of my own. But that experience with that band, it was very brief. We didn't even play a show. But my friend Peter was like, oh, it seems like you're in this band now. I'm starting this music night at this bar over on Clinton. Would you guys play? And I said yes at the time. And like a month before this show happened, this band was like, you know what? The band leader was like, I just don't feel like, I just don't have the time to do this. And so I said, okay. And I went back to Peter and I was like, well, I'm going to play. And in those like 4 or 5 weeks before this show, I was like, I'm going to write 4 songs and I'm going to learn 4 covers. Wow. And that is why I really started doing stuff. And that was probably 2010 or 11.
Wow.
But it was all these happenstance things. And also the way my parents raised me is like, if you say you're going to do something, you are going to do it no matter what. You're going to find a way. And in my mind, I had told Peter I would do this show for him. That's another thing that you don't think about until later. I'm like, oh, all these things really served me. If I said yes to something, I would, no matter what, would make sure I followed through on my commitment to somebody. And that's why I even started really writing in the first place, which is kind of crazy.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
It's like kind of an accident, and then this happy accident that's evolved into
yes, now
so
like
much.
13 years later, I'm like, yeah, it's pretty incredible.
Wow. Yeah. What was the journey like finding your voice? Literally and figuratively, right? Like both as a vocalist, as a composer.
Yeah. It's kind of crazy, some of the songs that are on my first album that I'm very, very proud of, because I really feel like I'm like, that is absolutely the best I could make at that time. And it's still like an amazing recording, and it's still probably the best I could. But I'm kind of shocked because some of them I'm like, I think those were like some of the first like couple songs I wrote ever. And to still be proud of what I made when I first was just learning how to record. I will say it was like that first album took 5 years to make. So there are, early versions of those songs where I'm just at a piano and it's really slow and it's like, but it's amazing to think that the song is still there. And I still play a lot of those songs today. But the evolution from where they went in the 5 years of kind of like, I'm starting to write songs. Okay, I think the next step is like, I got to record a few. I don't know what that means, right? But it was like, I think it's the continuing to like work at it. Because now I'm like, now I know exactly how I like to work in the studio. I know exactly how to arrange my own songs. Like that's something that I learned to do. Like I still was kind of like, what do I have at my fingertips? So I'm literally doing a version of a song and there's snaps and there's claps and there's a tiny bit of horn, and I got a few little harmonies, but like we were still just learning how to write a song and then record it and the millions of ways you could take it, but also like, well, what feels right for me?
You said it took you 5 years to finalize the album.
Yes, that first album in 2018. I mean, yeah, it took 5 years because we were like, this has to be.
I love that because the first only album I ever recorded was my first project, Sarka, and I had 2 weeks to record 10 songs. And then another week to do all of the vocals. And I just had no time. There's these conceptions of like, do it now and do it fast. And like, if things take time, like, I don't know, like there's this idea that we don't have time to make things the way we want them. And I'm like, take 5 years to make an album because you want it to be perfect in your own eyes and your own ears. And well, and I don't believe in perfect, but I think like, if it's your baby, like give it a chance to grow into what it's meant to be. Like you can't take a rosebud and be like, be a flower,
Absolutely.
And I just feel like it's great to hear that you gave yourself the time and space that you could have that result, and also how much the songs evolved over time.
For sure. Because there was like three maybe on that album that came out on the album that we had recorded these earlier versions of, but it's like there's also a very real world reason that it took 5 years. Like I did not have money, right? And the reason I was recording with Sasha and he was at CCC for the first 3 years was we could use that recording studio for free after hours. I did not have a car. I would get on my bike, get on the Max, take the Max out to Oregon City, just so we could have a couple hours. And then, take and then it was another hour of public transport back to my little house. And I could only do that when I had little chunks of money at the time to like give him like $50 for like the afternoon. So it's like when people also talk about like what goes into these things, I'm like, you will never understand how much time and like things we did for years just to make that album happen. And then even at the end, like, and I'm really grateful because I've done Kickstarters for both those albums. I was only able to ever produce like physical things because I reached out to my community and said, hey, like, I'd like to make some albums or like CDs. And, there's all these other like back end parts of making a record and making it physical or even like streaming it, right? You have to get it mastered. If you want to do vinyl, you have to like get a lathe cut and then send it to a plant. And that like there's all these things I now know that a lot of people have no clue go into not just making the songs, recording the songs, refining the songs, but like, the other technical part that like usually you have to pay somebody like $1,000 to master an album or something. And it's like, it's a lot, but
yeah, but it's a journey worth taking and also explaining because
most people don't understand what goes into all of this.
Yeah, for sure. And it's also like, oh, doesn't everybody know? 'Cause a lot of people I know are musicians that have done some aspect of this or work in some aspect of that, and they all know. But then I go on tour, or I go other places, or I go visit my parents, and people are like, what do you do? I can't remember. Like
so many things.
Yeah, so many things. Let me tell you, it's a patchwork. But like, a lot of people have no clue what it takes to get a song into your ears and it sound good.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
An important question I always want to ask my people as a composer, instructor, and performer: how do you deal with the inner critic or the inner judge so many of us face? How does it show its face to you? If it does, how do you respond, and what does it look like for you?
I feel like that class with Lisa and a lot of the things that I've read because I was inspired by that class, or also through Piano Push Play, where it's like big part of it is like we are listening so much harder and criticizing ourselves so much more than our teacher would, than a jury would, or that even like your average person on the street. I remember Lisa talking about you playing through mistakes, quote unquote mistakes, and I remember when my mom was doing theater, she always was like, the audience isn't going to know you messed up unless you show them. When the people do something and they forget, or they like, I kind of come luckily to some of this being able to be on stage from this thing growing up and doing it quite a bit, and kind of recognizing that performers and musicians are incredible, magical. They make stuff happen out of nothing, like they make sound with their fingers in their body, and sometimes it's not even, it's stuff they're coming up with. Like, it's a really amazing place and thing we get to do. There's certain parts about taking care of yourself and your body, especially playing instruments, singing, that sometimes when you're doing the part of performing where it's not in like quite a recital hall and you're like, I'm driving and then I'm trying to rush to the venue and I have to be everything to everyone, and you don't get to take that moment where you're like, you know what, I need to sit down and prepare, maybe do a little warm up, and then like say no to things for a second so I can go on stage and be really happy with my performance, which is sometimes a little hard to do in like bars and
right.
Which I still perform in quite a bit, but also like more and more I get to say where I will do shows, and that is an amazing place to be in, where you have more of the time to like take care of yourself, center yourself, and be in the right place to truly like give a good performance. I also always remember you're never going to be able to please everybody. And you're also going to have all these fans that you didn't even know. So it's like there will always be somebody unhappy, and there will always be plenty of people that are. And usually the person who's unhappy is the loudest. Mm-hmm. And there's all these other people that have had, same with Piano Push Play. Like sometimes there's people that are like, I need you to move this piano, I'm trying to sleep. And then I'll meet 20 other people throughout the year that somehow find out what I do, and then they tell me this really beautiful experience they had with it, but they just didn't know how to tell. I know those good things are happening all the time, but I mostly, if I ever get written to from the public, sometimes it's like they're not happy about something, or they went to a location and it wasn't there, and I was like, well, did you check the map? And they're like, oh, I didn't know you had a map. And I'm like, well, those kind of things.
I do, and you should check it.
Yeah. I hope that answered your question.
It does, yeah.
Yeah, I guess I've just built up quite a skin, I think, from many years of just like...
You have to.
Yeah,
you
do.
To. And I think that it's important for everyone to hear that, yes, it exists, but also building that layer of protection and realizing that like you can't make everyone happy, and you'll make a lot of people you'll make the right people happy if you're true to yourself. You know? And I think it's just, it is a part of many people's journeys. It has contributed to a lot of performance anxiety that, like I've struggled with. I don't know if you've ever had any issues with it, but I think also what you said about giving yourself the time and space to prepare, like I feel like the amount of time and space I have to prepare before a performance is directly correlated to the level of anxiety I have going into a performance, right? Like preparation is key. It's time and space during that actual day to like give yourself time to warm up and, stretch and breathe and exist, and when you're driving in traffic and you're rushing to some gig, and then you have to like talk to a million people before and organize and then just throw yourself on stage, and you've never tried the mic, you've never tried the piano, there are these things that can contribute to anxiety that then kicks the inner critic in because we don't have realistic expectations of what we can actually do given the preparation time we were allotted.
Yeah, and I also like to always be like, you know what? I could be doing a lot of things with my time, but this is what I want to do with it, and it's for me. I'm glad if you like it too. And I know there's going to be at least one person in this audience that's going to love it, but I always have to remember this is my stuff, and I want to be doing it. And I'm up here, and it's mainly for me.
Yes.
And I don't
if you
care
like
if some
it,
people,
great.
yeah, if you like it, great.
Yeah.
Or if you don't, like, go outside and like have a drink with somebody, or whatever you wanted to do. I feel lucky that usually, like, once a performance, somebody comes up to me and is like, "Your voice made me cry," or like, and did something like real, like I really touched them.
Right.
And I feel really lucky that I'm kind of to a point where I'm like, I know that's going to happen more often than not. And all I need is one. It's also like doing some of these shows where people aren't expecting that to happen. Because I'll open for this kind of rockin' band that I tour with. And when I open the show and people weren't expecting to really get some like something deep and emotional and like touching and like really beautiful in that way. It's kind of a gift to do it that way. There were no expectations for this, but then all of a sudden they got hit with something like, whoa, this is a moment.
Yeah. And while you were explaining this whole process, you mentioned Piano Push Play a few times. And so you're the founder of Piano Push Play, which is a Portland-based organization whose mission is to make pianos available to anyone who wants to play them. Can you tell me about that? Tell me about the inspiration behind the vision, how it evolved.
The inspiration from Piano Push Play happened because I was inspired, right? I saw a cellist on the street and he just was making the street corner turn into a magical realm for that evening and stopped me and my friends in my tracks. And I was like, I had just started coming back to playing piano at the time. And it was like the era of like flash mobs and pop-up things. And I was like, wow, it would be so cool to have like a pop-up piano or something. Like, I was a go-getter, but I had just never really tried like having an idea and making it happen in that way yet. But I couldn't get that idea out of my head. And a couple months later, I know you've heard this story before, when I realized, well, there's just a piano store so close, like there has to be a way or something. And luckily I talked to the right open-minded woman, Brenda, love her, at Portland Piano Co., who said, we like your idea of putting a piano on that street corner and playing for people. We'll put it on a dolly and push it up the street and play for people. And the interesting thing is that very first year when we were pushing it up and taking turns, I remember going to the practice rooms in PSU and knocking on a lot of doors of people that were playing things well beyond what I could ever play. Rachmaninoff and Tchaikovsky, like all of these things. I remember knocking on many doors and saying, hey, like, that was amazing. I don't know if you'd be available, but like, next Thursday, I'm going to have this piano just, out in the street at 13th and Burnside. Could you come and play that piece? And almost everybody I said that to was like, I can't. I need 3 more months to prepare this piece. Their inner critics were saying, oh my gosh, I cannot play this piece out in the open for people, even though, I'm going to play it in a recital. I'm going to, hopefully, and hopefully we're studying, this level of music because they wanted to share it with people, perform it for people, give people the gift of hearing this music live as interpreted by you, your own beautiful humanness. So I remember being kind of like shocked that the only people I could find to play with me that first year were music school dropouts. Like they were people that also hadn't kind of like fit into the program, but my gosh, if there was an instrument there, they would play at the drop of a hat. So it was, the next summer is when I kind of was able to get, 4 of them and have them painted a little bit and have them at the art museum. And that was the first year like Becca Schultz could come out and play, and I think you and a couple other people, but maybe because it was a little bit more formal or they finally could get it. I mean, that's a lesson just there in that these students thought that people walking by at night were going to like be listening to them like it was a jury recital or something and notice what they missed on this piece or something, or like mark them down, or, instead of being like, this is actually amazing. And 9 out of 10 people walking by, I can't even play a lick of this piece.
Right.
Right?
And yet the people with so much skill are the most hard on themselves.
Yeah. Well, I mean, because they're coming from that classical, competitive, such high stakes world. And so you're doing piano push play, and watching that a lot of the time, the people that sit down and play music and make people stop, it's not the most technical. It's not the most fireworky. It's just something they're really playing with feeling. People can feel how much they're putting into this instrument. Some of those lessons that I've seen with piano push play over the years where it's like, this should be about joy and a reason that I really kept going with it was like when I would play on the street, like people would say, thank you. Like this made my day. I was having such a bad day or just say thank you and don't tell me why. But like, that's such a different thing to hear than a teacher or a professor that's kind of like giving you technical feedback, assessments, whatever, instead of just being, wow, it was so beautiful, or thank you is such a different exchange. There's not that space where it's like, I'm a student and then maybe I'm a professional and I perform on these concerts, instead of being like, well, actually, like we should have it in moments that aren't not necessarily performance, but just like, this is just a gift, or this is something I want to do, and hey, I want to share it with you. And it's really hard to do that casually with pianos. That's another reason why I'm like, this is why we need to have these pianos out there, is like, there's lots of piano players out there that probably wish it was easier for them to like share a few tunes. And
I love how it's grown. I love seeing the impact on the community that it brings to people. Yeah. And I love that whole other element of like just having a different perspective on sharing music and saying thank you rather than feeling like you need to apologize for, not being perfect. I mean, what we bring to the musical world looks so different, but we all contribute something so special. And a piano on a street corner feels so much more welcoming and less intimidating, right? And I think it just really draws out the positives in performances. So thank you for all your work with that. And I will definitely put a link in the show notes to pianopushplay.org, because I want people to either think about participating next summer or this summer. It'll be next summer. And also maybe they have a piano they want to donate. So I think,
we want to keep those pianos out of the dump.
Yes.
There are so many. I remember hearing a statistic within that first year. It was like a New York Times article that was talking about how many pianos they just throw away, and that was another thing. I remember going to Portland Piano Co. and saying like, hey, if I figure out what to do with them, can I just have 4 of your pianos? I don't want this to happen. Right. It's like that era of like, oh, pop-ups, like, right, that'd be good. And then somebody's saying yes. And then I'm learning that this Piano Co. has all these old uprights in their attic that it's not even worth it for them to sell, because it's like they're not a $4,000 or $40,000 Steinway.
Doesn't mean they can't bring people joy.
Exactly.
That's beautiful. I only have like a couple more questions for you here. You chose to share an incredible original piece, Cabin Fever, that listeners will get to hear in its entirety at the end of this episode. What's the story behind it? Tell me about your inspiration.
Okay. So there's a very special place to me in Oregon. It's called Saddle Lake Lodge. And it's out by Sisters on the way to Bend. And it's beautiful, lodge and these rustic cabins. And it's on this beautiful lake. So I kind of became friends with this place. And they were starting to do an art residency program in their winter months. And I'd never done one of those before. So I had received that opportunity, which was amazing. It was the first time I ever was given the opportunity of like, the only thing you need to do, want to do for the next 2 weeks is work on your music. Those 2 weeks actually turned into 5 weeks in this cabin because the artist that was coming in after me got stuck in LA. Like, I really didn't see, like, nobody was staying at the hotel because it was like, Portland, like, the world was trying to figure out what was happening. And I had gone to this cabin with a couple ideas of just some beats I liked and chord changes and all these stuff that I liked that was, going to hopefully turn into me writing a collection of songs. But this song, Cabin Fever, was the one that I came to with no preconceived ideas of any kind. I went there and it was like very much like, what is happening in the world? I don't know what's happening. This is crazy. I'm also in one of my favorite places and it's so beautiful and I'm kind of very truly isolated. I barely saw a single person for those 5 weeks. There was only one person kind of making sure the lodge was just like running or something. Yeah. And I mean, if you listen to the lyrics, I'm really talking about like being there, the treetops, the clouds, the dock, the thinking about what is important at this time of life. Is it my possessions now? Is it, is it nature? Is it love? Is it people I love? Like, is it my music? So that song really came out of just being there at that time. And I ended up writing that whole album in those 5 weeks and making demos for all the songs and finishing them so that I could come back. And then I started truly professionally recording them with Raymond over the next couple years. So that's the story there.
Wow. I cannot wait for listeners to hear it. It really sounds, I mean, the kind of joy you're talking about and also ingenuity and unknown definitely comes across. And but in such a fun way, I can't wait for people to hear it. The way that you've synthesized all these instrumentations you were describing earlier comes across so clearly in Cabin Fever.
Oh, good. Okay.
Yeah. I'm so excited for people to hear it. Is there any nugget of inspiration or wisdom you can give to any musicians out there that want to find and embrace their authentic musical voice?
Mm-hmm. I feel like it's really amazing and powerful to make sure you're creating your own opportunities. As much as, yes, trying to perform in places and with people that you may not know yet, or like, it's really powerful to just say, hey, friends and family, or, I'm putting together my own concert and I want to share what I'm working on with you. That is incredibly valid and real because a lot of people, they may know you're a musician and they know you perform, but like some of them, my parents haven't seen me play in years because they just don't live here, but also like they listen to my recordings and stuff a bit, but I don't think they've actually witnessed me really doing the thing I do most of the time in the way that it's like, if you really want to know me, see me on stage a bit, but also there's something really vulnerable about that and really like deep about just saying, I didn't need to get to this other stage, but like a living room is just as powerful sometimes. Even I've witnessed this on the road sometimes where it's like, sometimes I play places that are in somebody's home or backyard and they're the most magical thing and people are really listening and they really support because they're like, oh my gosh, this person got in their car and drove how many hours here and like is sharing these deep things inside of them on stage. And I need to recognize that. I need to listen. And I also want to like, tell me how I can support you. Okay, got it. I'm going to buy that vinyl, whatever. So I feel like it's kind of a matter of, on occasion, just finding your own opportunity to perform, but also just because one person says no, don't let that be the end of you trying to get somewhere. It may just not be the year to do that. So often I've heard from lots of artists that I've wanted to paint a piano, like, hey, would you like to do one this year? Like, your friend did one last year. Like, oh, you must have heard about it or something. And like, I'm talking about some big artists like Portugal and Man. They've painted a couple pianos by now, but I met one of them in the first couple of years of doing these pianos. Like, and I realized some of them they also paint and all this stuff. And I remember asking one of them if they wanted, if the band would do one. And he's like, we'd love to, but this year's just not gonna work out. And so I just made that little note that next year I was like, okay, I'm gonna ask him again. I asked him again. That year, they're like, no, we'd love to, but this year just not gonna work out. And the third year I asked is when they were like, okay, great, send it over. We'll do it.
I love that.
We'll work on it as a team and all this stuff. And the same goes with like locations that people told me you're never going to be able to have a piano in a park. It's going to get destroyed and people are going to throw it in the river. They're going to use it like a bathroom, whatever, all these things. Yeah. Like I was like, are you sure? But I kept telling people that my dream was to get these pianos in the parks. And eventually I told the person who was like, you know what? I actually think I know the real person that you should talk to at parks who's might be a little bit more open-minded and willing to take a chance on taking a few pianos. But I feel like maybe even a younger version of myself or some other people I see, it's like they hear one no about something and they're like, okay, well, it's never going to happen. And I think the thing you got to just be like, okay, well, that was a no for now. I'm going to go, if I can't have that artist, I'll go ask a few other ones. Or like if this location, this venue says no, okay, I'll go ask a few other ones. But that doesn't mean that at another time, I'll ask them again. Because who knows all the different factors and ways it wasn't right for them and for me at the same time. You know, it wasn't personal. It's just not working out this time.
Such a good perspective for people. I think one no can be so heartbreaking for people.
I've heard a lot of no's by now.
Yeah.
This is the thing. I'm like, okay.
One negative comment, and it's just people carry it around for the rest of their lives.
Yeah.
And I think it's just, you know, it's so much more than one yes or no. Like, it's just, you know, just because it's a no now doesn't mean it will be a no down the road. And just to reroute and say like, okay, I'll ask again, or I'll find a different route, or I'll whatever. But it's not, no, don't be doing this. It's just like, no, maybe reroute, like, or get creative.
Yeah.
You know?
Because there's been some interesting people or locations that came about because the initial one said no. And then, you know, I also learned go where you want it. Go where people are really enthusiastic to have you, where it's like, instead of like striving for it, I only wanted to play there. Like, but wait, this person over here just like wants to have me come. They want to like really support me. They want to put me up. They want to do all these things to like support what it is I'm doing. I'm going to go over there.
Right.
Don't let that one no stop you from whatever it is you want to do.
That is so great to hear. Thank you. I needed to hear that today. I think it's such a great reminder. So how can people best get in touch with you? I know you have a website, megandiana.com.
Yes, they can get in touch with me there. There's all the info about like what shows I'm doing like that month, where they can look at, you know, some really pretty videos we've made, where they can find all the music. Same with Piano Push Play. It's pianopushplay.com. It shows you all the pianos, tells you more about the artists, where they all are, all that good stuff.
Awesome. And what are your socials?
Hello, Megan Diana on Instagram, and then Piano Push Play.
Awesome.
Instagram. Yeah.
Awesome. Definitely follow Megan on her socials and check out her shows. She's so fun to watch live, and as you say, such a dreamy sound and just really inspiring to watch. Thank you so much for being with me today, Megan, and for joining me on Artistry with Heart, for sharing your wisdom with the world, and just for being you. Such a gift. And I know so many people are going to benefit from this conversation.
Yeah.
Well, we hope that you'll stay tuned for future episodes like this one. Listeners out there, if you heard something that resonated with you or you want more of it, make sure to download the journal prompt PDF directly related to Megan's episode that you can find in the show notes or at my website, stephaniebernards.org/inspiration. Here you can go deeper with some of the questions and conversation we had today and with your own personal artistry, because I hope that's why you're here. That's all for now. Until next time, be you and stay inspired. And now the full version of Cabin Fever.
Heads up, friends, we're also on Patreon. This podcast was created to support every creative, so if you like the work that we're doing, please consider subscribing to help us continue making content and grow our community. For just $7 a month, you'll not only be supporting more resources for musicians, but you'll also gain access to downloadable journal prompt PDFs with insightful questions that will help you go deeper with the conversations in each episode.